Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Dr. Michelle White with If Your Meds Could Talk. Welcome today. Today we're going to be talking about, we're covering the vital organs over the next few episodes before we delve into how the medications talk to your body. So today we're going to talk about the nervous system. And I want to get going because the nervous system can be very intensive, and I want to just go over some things so that you'll understand how your nervous system works. So, like you said, some of you all might say you have some nerve. So the brain is boss. It could do it alone. However, it can't do it alone. It needs some nerves, actually a lot of them. And it needs the spinal cord, which is the long bundle of nerves inside your spinal column, the vertebrae that protects it. The spinal cord and nerves, known as the nervous system, lets messages flow back and forth between the brain and the body. Okay? So, we're going to talk about where your emotions lie, how a good brain to your, how to be good to your brain. We're going to talk about all of those things, but let's get going. All right. So, the main functions of the central nervous system we're going to talk about. All right. So, one of the core functions of the nervous system is to regulate processes of the following categories. You have your motor, you have your sensory, and you have your automatic. Your motor nerve endings or nervous system regulated by efferent neurons. These motor sensories encompasses the movement of all your muscle tissues, both voluntary and involuntary. And then you have your sensory information, and this is interpreted through hearing, your sight, your spatial awareness, your temporal awareness, your temperature, your taste, your touch, and your smell. Again, that's your sensory. And it's largely regulated by afferent neurons. Sensory information is sent to the central nervous system, which makes decisions based on these, what we call neurotransmissions, and direct organs systems accordingly. I'm going to explain all this later. Then you have your automatic. And this mainly refers to the processes which are not regulated by the brain, but by a pathway called the reflex arch. And the reflexes are typically motor reactions that need to happen extremely fast. So going through the brain would actually be a disadvantage. So it kind of bypasses the brain. Instead of sensory receptors of the parasympathetic nervous system are stimulated, then pass signals to a given motor neuron via the spinal cord. This signal then activates the target muscles or the organs to engage in the necessary movement. There are over 100 trillion neural connections in the average human brain, all in instant communications via synapses. These synapses only take a fraction of a millisecond to transmit a given electrical pulse through the spinal cord. It's estimated to go at a speed of 268 miles per hour. You've never done that in your car, I bet, unless you're in Germany. All right. So these synapses are arranged and connected and depends on the subsystem they fall under. So let's talk about the cranial nerve system. So you have the cranial nerve system, and these are nerves that connect the brain to the eyes, to the ears, to the mouth, and other sensory organs of the head. There are 12 pairs of these nerves that make up the cranial nerve system. Then you have the peripheral nervous system. And this subsystem consists of sensory neurons, what we call ganglia. And they are clusters of neurons and nerves that connect the central nervous system to the arms, to the hands, legs, and feet. There are 31 pairs of nerves that make up the peripheral nervous system. Then you have the autonomic nervous system. This is a collection of nerves that connect the central nervous system to the lungs, the heart, the stomach, your intestines, the bladder, and your sex organs. And then you have the central nervous system. And this is comprised of the brain, the spinal cord, and the retina. It is considered the command center of the brain, of the body. Okay, we talked about the brain already. So the central nervous system again comprises the brain, the spinal cord, and the retina, and is considered the command center. Think about Star Trek, or think about Star Wars and the command center of that ship. Well, that's the same as the central nervous system. All right. So the building block of the nervous system is the neuron. And this is a fun fact that you should understand. The human brain contains approximately 100 billion neurons. That's more than 14 times the number of human beings currently on the planet Earth. Did you know that? The anatomy of the neuron may differ slightly on its function, but the structure that comprises it remains the same. Another cell type central to the functioning of the nervous system is the glial cells. And the glial cells have 6 functions. 1, they help support and hold neurons in place. 2, they protect the neurons. 3, they create a myelin. And we're going to talk about how the myelin sheath works, especially with people who have MS. They create a myelin, which helps to move nerve impulses. They repair neurons and help restore neuron function. They trim out dead neurons, and they regulate neurotransmitters. So a neuron is composed of the following parts. The neuron has a nucleus. It has a cell body. It has a dendrite. And the dendrite is responsible for receiving information, such as synapses, for the cell to process and send through the axon terminal to the synapse to be passed on again. So it's like a cyclic. It's a cyclic movement. The axon, which is like the corridor. Think about a hallway. Think about going down the hospital hallway, the corridor. And the axon is like a corridor in which the sensory information is passed to the dendrite to be sent to another neuron. The term nerve doesn't refer to a neuron. Let me repeat that. The term nerve doesn't refer to a neuron, even though it seems like it should. What it actually refers to is a collection of multiple axons, and the axons is a collection of axons that work together as a collective body. In the same way that the grouping of asparagus stalks makes one bunch of asparagus, a bundle of axons makes one nerve. Did y'all get that? In the same way, the grouping of asparagus, just imagine, close your eyes and see some asparagus like I'm doing, and you see those asparagus stalks and they make one bunch. You don't buy one asparagus, you buy a bunch of asparagus. Well, that's the same bundle of axons. They make one nerve. And the different types of nerves are, get this, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. So when you have spinal injuries, they're going to say it's at the C1 or the T1 or the L1 or the S1. And all they're describing is where on your body or your spinal cord in which you have some type of injury. Cervical, thoracic, lumbar, or sacral. Then we have the myelin sheath, which I talked about earlier. This is a fatty tissue that insulates the axon by preventing depolarization. This allows electrical impulses to travel across the axon uninterrupted. It's like if you can imagine electricity. As you all know, electrical cords have some kind of insulation around them. And once you plug in a cord into the socket, if there's no insulation around that cord and you touch it, you're going to be shocked. Well, the same goes with the myelin sheath. That insulation around your nerve, around the axon, it insulates and it causes that electrical impulses to go through. Well, when the myelin sheath is damaged, that's where you get some issues. And we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about the medications that will help those when you lose your myelin sheath. Then we have the node of Ranvier. These are the gaps in the myelin sheath. So their function is to speed up propagation of action potential along the axon via saltatory conduction. Because these gaps are not myelinated, the action potential appears to jump between the nodes, like water fountains at Disney World. Have you seen the water fountains at Disney World? Well, this type of conduction also helps to conserve energy by decreasing the required movement of ions by 100-fold. All right, so then we go into the axon terminals, and these are at the end of the axon, the last stop before electrical impulses are sent through the synapse. I wish I could show you. I'm going to give you some pictorial pictures in your mind later. This structure converts electrical impulses into chemical signals, which when released are then called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters pass through the synapse to the next dendrite and are then converted back into an electrical pulse to repeat the process until it reaches the proper organ. And that's what goes on with the types of axons. Okay, so there are 4 different types of neurons. Their anatomy is determined by what types of information they'll need to propagate to what organs and in what region of the body. In fact, there are so many different types of neurons in the brain alone that they are not yet all described. The wonders of God, okay? This is because neurons in the brain will differ based on what part of the target neuron they're communicating to. Dendrite versus axon. They express different genes, expressing varying electrical impulses and several more distinctions. The types of neurons are these. You have unipolar, bipolar, pseudo-unipolar, and multipolar. Okay? So the neurons in the spinal cord are sensory and motor sensory. And sensory neurons are activated by sensory input from the environment. As I said before, touch, taste, smell, sound, sight. Always remember sensory, senses, your 5 senses, touch, taste, smell, sound, and sight. Okay? The motor neurons in the spinal cord are part of the CNS, the central nervous system, and they connect to the muscles, the glands, and the organs throughout the bodies. Motor. Think about the motor of a car. The motor of the car, it gets the engine. It gets the motor, or the engine of the car is responsible for the wheels, everything in the car to move. Well, the same, the motor neurons in the spinal cord are the part of the central nervous system, and they're connected to the muscles, the glands, and the organs throughout the bodies. Okay, so let's go into the central nervous system. The higher functions of the nervous system also is referred to the executive functions, and they're controlled by the brain. And these include your cognition, your emotions, and your consciousness. Your cognition is your thinking, learning, memory, language, insight, creating and planning goals. Cognition is primarily controlled in the frontal lobe. Remember that? And it sets humans apart from all species on the earth in its evolutionary development. Then let's talk about emotions. Emotions. They're controlled from many different structures. Emotions can influence where in the brain memories are stored and the way they're recalled. Emotions are controlled from many different organ systems as well. The central nervous system being only one. The hippocampus and the amygdala, the hippocampus and the amygdala are 2 of the nervous system structures involved in the regulation of emotions. Let me repeat that. The hippocampus and the amygdala are two of the nervous system structures involved in the regulation of emotions. Consciousness. Our consciousness. Our consciousness are largely focused in the cerebellum. Remember I talked about the cerebellum? The consciousness is the cognitive skill that is still very poorly understood by our researchers, but central in what separates humans from many species. So here we go with the higher functions of the nervous system. So let's talk about the anatomy of the nervous system. And we already talked about the cerebrum. We talked about the cerebellum. We talked about the brain stem. We talked about the pituitary. But now we're going to get into what we call the peripheral nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is more straightforward than the central nervous system, thank goodness. It is made up of the pairs of nerves that branch off from the spinal cord and extend through the body. As I said, there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves, all of which serve to form networks of communication between the brain and other organs of our body. And this is going to be very important as we get going and talking about the different medications that are part of your body. But that's the nervous system in a nutshell. I may come back and kind of make this very simple and plain so you could actually visual. So there might be a part B, because I like for you to understand as I'm describing different things audio, because you don't have a visual, but you got to have some kind of visual picture in your mind as I'm talking. So I'm probably going to do a part B of this so that you'll understand exactly how the nervous system works, because when it comes to your medication, your medications talk to your nervous system, and I need to be able to explain how these meds will talk to your nervous system as well. So that's it for today. This is Michelle, Dr. Michelle White, your friendly pharmacist, your friendly drug pusher, asking you to subscribe, come back, listen to us. And if you would be so kind to rate what you hear, what you're listening to, I'd appreciate it. Bye-bye.